Well, this is just a bizarre butthole. Like, this is actually being a serious issue for me right now. So I'm trying to sit down and, I guess, lead off. Okay. Hi, this is Sai. Hello. How's it going? This is Some Idiot Reads. And, if it looks like I'm trying to stare at something, that's because I am. Um, my video encoder is getting randomly overloaded. I need to dig into this somehow at some point. Let me just check this over here. Let's click over to there. And what happens if I go like this? Are we going to do anything? Are you going to go a little crazy? No? No? Nothing? Alright, I'm tentatively going to go with that. Hi, again, this is Sai. It has been a hot minute since I did one of these and since I released one. The last one that I did was actually it should be pretty easy to find. It was a reading of the very beginning of Coyote Wallace's American Mystic, The Life, Death, and Rebirth of Jimmy Wonderful, which I will again ask that you please go buy a copy of that, or convince people to buy copies, or do both. It's a fantastic work. And show some love to a truly fantastic person and a writer whom I respect very, very much. I love you, dude. And while I want to sit and do a recording of some more of his dispatches, because I know he's released some new ones, I really want to do those. I also don't want my channel to wind up being just me reading his dispatches, as fun as that is. I want to try and do some additional stuff as well. So, I'm actually going to be recording this one, as well as one that will be for releasing on Thanksgiving weekend, because I will be out of town. I'll be recording that after this. But I will probably do the dispatches for the next recording, and for this one, this is actually something I was really wanting to do when I initially started doing these readings. I know I started with Project 2025. God, I hated that. But I was trying to think of other things that would be neat to read. Be it, and most of it was looping back to, what about philosophy? Because I personally have had a lot of experience with various different individuals who are students of philosophy or themselves philosophers. And I have definitely picked up a lot of philosophic information over the years, just by simple, thinking radiation, we'll call it. And then my own, critical thinking and so on. But very rarely have I actually sat down and read a number of philosophical, classics. Now, this is one that I have read, but it's probably been something like 20 years since the last time I did. This, which should have been on the title card for this, or not the title card, the thumbnail for this, and also in the actual title of the video. But what I'm going to be reading here is Emma Goldman's Anarchism and Other Essays. Emma Goldman was a prominent anarchist philosopher. And mind you, this is anarchism in the context of anarchism as I hate to say it as a form of governance. Not in the colloquial sense of oh yeah, anarchy, everything destroyed. No, there's a lot of actual thought behind anarchism as a philosophy. There are many different branches of anarchism. It's something well worth actually studying from a scientific mindset, not just don't isolate yourself to just the whole sense of chaos and debauchery that everyone likes to go ahead and roll with. There is more to it than that. It's a subject very near and dear to me. And Emma Goldman, in particular, was a very influential one. As I said, though, it has been probably the better part of 20 years since I read this. And so I'm curious. I remember reading it and enjoying very much what I did read, but I do not remember much at all of the actual content. So What I want to do here is actually read through this. At the very least, just read through and provide, the information of this actual thing. Like, hey, huzzah! But also, when appropriate, try and make my own commentary as I usually want to do. But without anything else, I'm going to go ahead and just dive on into this. Now, this particular this particular one that I'm reading from is, I believe it was the Anarchist Library. I just from a quick Google search. I'm not particularly aware of anything one direction or the other for that site. Didn't really vet it. It was just one of the first ones to pop up. So I'm rolling with that. I will put a link to the actual document itself in the description. So, and you know what, just to make sure that I don't forget that, because I have caught myself forgetting that. Link Goldman PDF in description. Also link to COYOTE's book, because it is awesomeness with 3 S's. Right. All right, so gonna go ahead, dive on into this. We are 6 minutes in. That gives me about an hour and 20 to go ahead and see what I can get crammed in. Now, there is a biographical sketch at the beginning of this. Looks like it was a breakdown of Emma Goldman in general. But I was not sure as far as it goes for the its relevance and context to the actual core original book itself. So I decided to go and skip past that, but you can definitely read through that yourself. We are instead going to start with the preface. Some 21 years ago, I heard the first great anarchist speaker, the inimitable John Most. It seemed to me then, and for many years after, that the spoken word hurled forth among the masses with such wonderful eloquence, such enthusiasm and fire, could never be erased from the human mind and soul. How could any one of all the multitudes who flocked to Most's meetings escape his prophetic voice? Surely they had to but hear him to throw off their old beliefs and to see the truth and beauty of anarchism. My one great longing then was to be able to speak with the tongue of John Most, that I, too, might thus reach the masses. Oh, for the naivete of youth's enthusiasm. It is a time when the hardest thing seems but child's play. It is the only period in life worthwhile. Alas, this period is of but short duration. Like spring, the Sturm und Drang period of the propagandist brings forth growth, frail and delicate, to be matured or killed according to its powers of resistance against 1,000 vicissitudes. My great faith in the wonder worker, the spoken word, is no more. I have realized its inadequacy to awaken thought, or even emotion. Gradually, and with no small struggle against this realization, I came to see that oral propaganda is, at best, but a means of shaking people from their lethargy. It leaves no lasting impression. The very fact that most people attend meetings only if aroused by newspaper sensations, or because they expect to be amused, is proof that they really have no inner urge to learn. It is altogether different with the written mode of human expression. No one, unless intensely interested in progressive ideas, will bother with serious books. That leads me to another discovery, made after many years of public activity. It is this. All claims of education notwithstanding, the pupil will accept only that which his mind craves. Already, this truth is recognized by most modern educators in relation to the immature mind. I think it's equally true regarding the adult. Anarchists or revolutionists can no more be made than musicians. All that can be done is to plant the seeds of thought. Whether something vital will develop depends largely on the fertility of the human soil, though the quality of the intellectual seed must not be overlooked. In meetings, the audience is distracted by 1,000 non-essentials. The speaker, though ever so eloquent, cannot escape the restlessness of the crowd, with the inevitable result that he will fail to strike root. In all probability, he will not even do justice to himself. The relation between the writer and the reader is more intimate. True, books are only what we want them to be, rather what we read into them. That we can do so demonstrates the importance of written as against oral expression. It is this certainty which has induced me to gather in one volume my ideas on various topics of individual and social importance. They represent the mental and soul struggles of 21 years, the conclusions derived after many changes and inner revisions. I am not sanguine enough to hope that my readers will be as numerous as those who have heard of me, but I prefer to reach the few who really want to learn, rather than the many who come to be amused. As to the book, it must speak for itself. Explanatory remarks do but detract from the ideas set forth. However, I wish to forestall two objections which will undoubtedly be raised. One is in reference to the essay on anarchism, the other on minorities versus majorities. Why do you not say how things will be operated under anarchism? Is a question I have had to meet thousands of times. Because I believe that anarchism cannot consistently impose an ironclad program or method on the future. The things every new generation has to fight, and which it can least overcome, are the burdens of the past, which holds all of us as in a net. Anarchism, at least as I understand it, leaves posterity free to develop its own particular systems in harmony with its needs. Our most vivid imagination cannot foresee the potentialities of a race set free from external restraints. How, then, can anyone assume to map out a line of conduct for those to come? We, who dearly pay for every breath of pure, fresh air, must guard against the tendency to fetter the future. If we succeed in clearing the soil from the rubbish of the past and present, we will leave to posterity the greatest and safest heritage of all ages. The most disheartening tendency common among readers is to tear out one sentence from a work as a criterion of the writer's ideas or personality. Friedrich Nietzsche, for instance, is decried as a hater of the weak because he believed in the Übermensch. It does not occur to the shallow interpreters of that giant mind that this vision of the Übermensch also called for a state of society which will not give birth to a race of weaklings and slaves. It's the same narrow attitude which sees in Max Stirner not but the apostle of the theory, each for himself, the devil take the hind one. That Stirner's individualism contains the greatest social possibilities is utterly ignored. Yet it is nevertheless true that if society is ever to become free, it will be so through liberated individuals whose efforts make society. These examples, and you'll give me a moment. Okay. Sorry, I had to check the video. These examples bring me to the objection that will be raised to minorities versus majorities. No doubt I shall be excommunicated as an enemy of the people because I repudiate the mass as a creative factor. I shall prefer that rather than be guilty of the demagogic platitudes so commonly in vogue as a bait for the people. Or I shall prefer that rather than be guilty of the demagogic platitudes so commonly in vogue. I realize the malady of the oppressed and disinherited masses only too well, but I refuse to prescribe the usual ridiculous palliatives which allow the patient to neither die nor to recover. One cannot be too extreme in dealing with social ills. Besides, the extreme thing is generally the true thing. My lack of faith in the majority is dictated by my faith in the potentialities of the individual. Only when the latter becomes free to choose his associates for a common purpose can we hope for order and harmony out of this world of chaos and inequality. For the rest, my book must speak for itself. Emma Goldman. I do want to comment just real quick. There is the whole notation of, speakers and all that, and I'm hoping the spirit of Emma Goldman does not take offense to my reading this. I would hope that she would not, and that would be understanding as things have shifted and changed since, God, I think she was like the late 1900s or early 1900s? What the hell? Late 1900s is my life. Let's see. Just checking real quick. What was she? Okay, so she was born 1869, died 1940. So, pretty big difference in time going on there. The heyday of her life was almost 100 years ago. Or, well, it was around 100 years ago. In any event, it is my hope that this does respect. And that is what at least I'm trying to do. And also because I wanted to read this myself again for a while. And this gets me off my ass to do it. So screw it. Chapter 1. Anarchism. What it really stands for. Anarchy. This appears to be a poem by John Henry Mackay. Ever reviled, accursed, ne'er understood, thou art the grisly terror of our age. Wreck of all order, cry the multitude, art thou, and war, and murder's endless rage. Oh, let them cry, to them that ne'er have striven, the truth that lies behind a word to find. To them the word's right meaning was not given. They shall continue blind among the blind. But thou, O word, so clear, so strong, so pure, thou sayest all which I for goal have taken. I give thee to the future, thine secure, when each at least unto himself shall waken. Comes it in sunshine, in the tempest's thrill? I cannot tell, but it the earth shall see. I am an anarchist, wherefore I will not rule, and also ruled I will not be. The history of human growth and development is, at the same time, the history of the terrible struggle of every new idea heralding the approach of a brighter dawn. In its tenacious hold on tradition, the old has never hesitated to make use of the foulest and cruelest means to stay the advent of the new, in whatever form or period the latter may have asserted itself. Nor need we retrace our steps into the distant past to realize the enormity of opposition, difficulties, and hardships placed in the path of every progressive idea. The rack, the thumbscrew, and the knout, I think that's how you pronounce that, are still with us. So are the convict's garb and the social wrath, all conspiring against the spirit that is serenely marching on. Anarchism could not hope to escape the fate of all other ideas of innovation. Indeed, as the most revolutionary and uncompromising innovator, anarchism must needs meet with the combined ignorance and venom of the world it aims to reconstruct. To deal even remotely with all that is being said and done against anarchism would necessitate the writing of a whole volume. I shall therefore meet only two of the principal objections, and in so doing, I shall attempt to elucidate what anarchism really stands for. The strange phenomenon of the opposition to anarchism is that it brings to light the relation between so-called intelligence and ignorance. And yet, this is not so very strange when we consider the relativity of all things. The ignorant mass has in its favor that it makes no pretense of knowledge or ignorance, acting, as it always does, by mere impulse. Its reasons are like those of a child. Why? Well, because. Yet the opposition of the uneducated to anarchism deserves the same consideration as that of the intelligent man. What then are the objections? First, that anarchism is impractical, though a beautiful ideal. Second, anarchism stands for violence and destruction, hence it must be repudiated as vile and dangerous. Both the intelligent man and the ignorant mass judge not from a thorough knowledge of the subject, but either from hearsay or false interpretation. A practical scheme, says Oscar Wilde, is either one already in existence, or a scheme that could be carried out under existing conditions. But it is exactly the existing conditions that one objects to, and any scheme that could accept these conditions is wrong and foolish. The true criterion of the practical, therefore, is not whether the latter can keep intact the wrong or the foolish. Rather, it is whether the scheme has vitality enough to leave the stagnant waters of the old and build, as well as sustain, a new life. In the light of this conception, anarchism is indeed practical. More than any other idea, it is helping to do away with the wrong and foolish. More than any other idea, it is building and sustaining new life. The emotions of the ignorant man are continuously kept at a pitch by the most blood-curdling stories about anarchism. Not a thing too outrageous to be employed against this philosophy and its exponents. Therefore, anarchism represents to the unthinking what the proverbial bad man does to the child. A black monster bent on swallowing everything. In short, destruction and violence. Destruction and violence. How is the ordinary man to know that the most violent element in society is ignorance? That one. Truth. That its power of destruction is the very thing anarchism is combating. Nor is he aware that anarchism, whose roots, as it were, are part of nature's forces, destroys not healthful tissue, but parasitic growths that feed on the life's essence of society. It's merely clearing the soil from weeds and sagebrush, that it may eventually bear healthy fruit. Someone has said it requires less mental effort to condemn than to think. The widespread mental indolence, so prevalent in society, proves this to be only too true. Rather than go to the bottom of any given idea, to examine into its origin and meaning, most people will either condemn it altogether, or rely on some superficial, more prejudicial definition of non-essentials. Anarchism urges man to think, to investigate, to analyze every proposition, but that the brain capacity of the average reader be not taxed too much. I shall also begin with the definition, and then elaborate on the latter. Anarchism, the philosophy of a new social order based on liberty unrestricted by man-made law. The theory that all forms of government rest on violence, and are therefore wrong and harmful, as well as unnecessary. The new social order rests, of course, on the materialistic basis of life. But, while all anarchists agree that the main evil today is an economic one, they maintain that the solution of that evil can be brought about only through the consideration of every phase of life, individual as well as the collective, internal as well as the external phases. Through a thorough perusal of the history of human development will disclose two elements in bitter conflict with each other, elements that are only now beginning to be understood, not as foreign to each other, but as closely related and truly harmonious, if only placed in the proper environment, the individual and social instincts. The individual and society have waged a relentless and bloody battle for ages, striving for supremacy because each was blind to the value and importance of the other. The individual and social instincts, the one a most potent factor for individual endeavor, for growth, aspiration, and self-realization, the other an equally potent factor for mutual helpfulness and social well-being. The explanation of the storm raging within the individual, and between him and his surroundings, is not far to seek. The primitive man, not able to understand his being, much less the unity of all life, felt himself absolutely dependent on blind, hidden forces, ever ready to mock and taunt him. Out of that attitude grew the religious concepts of man, as a mere speck of dust dependent on superior powers on high, who could only be appeased by complete surrender. All the early sagas rest on that idea, which continues to be the leitmotif of biblical tales dealing with the relation of man to God, to the state, to society. Again and again the same motif. The man is nothing, the powers are everything. Thus Jehovah would only endure man on condition of complete surrender. Man can have all the glories of the earth, but he must not become conscious of himself. The state, society, and moral laws all sing the same refrain. Man can have all the glories of the earth, but he must not become conscious of himself. Anarchism is the only philosophy which brings to man the consciousness of himself, which maintains that God, the state, and society are non-existent, that their promises are null and void, since they can be fulfilled only through man's subordination. Anarchism is therefore the teacher of the unity of life, not merely in nature, but in man. There is no conflict between the individual and the social instincts, any more than there is between the heart and the lungs. The one, the receptacle of precious life essence, the other, the repository of the element that keeps the essence pure and strong. The individual is the heart of society, conserving the essence of social life. Society is the lungs, which are distributing the element to keep the life essence. that is, the individual, pure and strong. The one thing of value in the world, says Emerson, is the active soul. This every man contains within him. The soul active sees the absolute truth and utters truth and creates. In other words, the individual instinct is the thing of value in the world. It is the true soul that sees and creates the truth alive, out of which is to come a still greater truth, the reborn social soul. Anarchism is the great liberator of man from the phantoms that have held him captive. It is the arbiter and pacifier of the two forces for individual and social harmony. To accomplish that unity, anarchism has declared war on the pernicious influences which have so far prevented the harmonious blending of individual and social instincts, the individual and society. Religion, the dominion of the human mind; property, the dominion of human needs; and government, the dominion of human conduct, represent the stronghold of man's enslavement and all the horror it entails. Religion, how it dominates man's mind, how it humiliates and degrades the soul. God is everything, man is nothing, says religion. But out of that nothing, God has created a kingdom so despotic, so tyrannical, so cruel, so terribly exacting, that naught but gloom and tears and blood have ruled the world since gods began. Anarchism rouses the man to rebellion against this black monster. Break your mental fetters, says anarchism to man, for not until you think and judge for yourself will you get rid of the dominion of darkness, the greatest obstacle to all progress. Property, the dominion of man's needs, the denial of the right to satisfy his needs. Time was when property claimed a divine right, when it came to man with the same refrain even as religion: sacrifice, abnegate, submit. The spirit of anarchism has lifted man from his prostrate position. He now stands erect, with his face towards the light. He has learned to see the insatiable, devouring, devastating nature of property, and he is preparing to strike the monster dead. Property is robbery, said the great French anarchist Proudhon. Yes, but without risk and danger to the robber. Monopolizing the accumulated efforts of man, property has robbed him of his birthright and turned him loose a pauper and an outcast. Property has not even the time-worn excuse that man does not create enough to satisfy all needs. The A, B, and C student of economics knows that the productivity of labor within the last few decades far exceeds normal demand. But what are the normal demands to an abnormal institution? The only demand that property recognizes is its own gluttonous appetite for a greater wealth, because wealth means power. The power to subdue, to crush, to exploit. The power to enslave, to outrage, to degrade. America is particularly boastful of her great power, her enormous national wealth. Poor America! Of what avail is all her wealth if the individuals comprising the nation are wretchedly poor? If they live in squalor, in filth, in crime, with hope and joy gone, a homeless, soilless army of human prey. I'm going to take a moment and let that paragraph sink in while I drink a little water. When was this written? Now, let's see. 1910. So, a little over 100 years ago. The fuck are we doing? I'm going to be honest also, just as a quick side bit. That is also part of the reason I'm reading this. We're in a national shit show. And that's all I'm going to comment on that at the moment, because I don't feel like going deeper into it. But I feel this is worth reading. In any event, it is generally conceded that unless the returns of any business venture exceed the cost, bankruptcy is inevitable. But those engaged in the business of producing wealth have not yet learned even this simple lesson. Every year, the cost of production in human life is growing larger. 50,000 killed, 100,000 wounded in America last year. The returns to the masses, who help create wealth, are getting ever smaller. Yet America continues to be blind to the inevitable bankruptcy of our business of production. Nor is this the only crime of the latter. Still more fatal is the crime of turning the producer into a mere particle of a machine, with less will and decision than his master of steel and iron. Man is being robbed not merely the products of his labor, but the power of free initiative, of originality, and the interest in, or desire for, things he is making. Real wealth consists in things of utility and beauty, and things that help create strong, beautiful bodies and surroundings inspiring to live in. But if man is doomed to wind cotton around a spool, or dig coal, or build roads for 30 years of his life, there can be no talk of wealth. What he gives to the world is only gray and hideous things, reflecting a dull and hideous existence. Too weak to live, too cowardly to die. Strange to say, there are people who extol this deadening method of centralized production as the proudest achievement of our age. They fail utterly to realize that if we are to continue in machine subserviency, our slavery is more complete than was our bondage to the king. They do not want to know that centralization is not only the death knell of liberty, but also of health and beauty, of art and science, all these being impossible in a clock-like, mechanical atmosphere. Anarchism cannot but repudiate such a method of production. Its goal is the freest possible expression of all the latent powers of the individual. Oscar Wilde defines a perfect personality as, quote, one who develops under perfect conditions, who is not wounded, maimed, or in danger. A perfect personality, then, is only possible in a state of society where a man is free to choose the mode of work, the conditions of work, and the freedom to work. One to whom the making of a table, the building of a house, or the tilling of the soil is what the painting is to the artist and the discovery to the scientist. The result of inspiration, of intense longing, and deep interest to work as a creative force. That being the ideal of anarchism, its economic arrangements must consist of voluntary productive and distributive associations, gradually developing into free communism as the best means of producing with the least waste of human energy. Anarchism, however, also recognizes the right of the individual, or numbers of individuals, to arrange at all times for other forms of work in harmony with their tastes and desires. Such free display of human energy being possible only under complete individual and social freedom, anarchism directs its forces against the third and greatest foe of all social equality, namely the state, organized authority, or statutory law, the dominion of human conduct. Just as religion has fettered the human mind, and as property, or the monopoly of things, has subdued and stifled man's needs, so has the state enslaved his spirit, dictating every phase of conduct. All government, in essence, says Emerson, is tyranny. It matters not whether it is the government by divine right or majority rule. In every instance, its aim is the absolute subordination of the individual. Referring to the American government, the greatest American anarchist, David Thoreau, said, quote, government, what is it but a tradition, though a recent one, endeavoring to transmit itself unimpaired to posterity, but each instance losing its integrity? It has not the vitality and force of a single living man. Law never made man a whit more just, and by means of their respect for it, even the most well-disposed are daily made agents of injustice. End quote. Indeed, the keynote of government is injustice. With the arrogance and self-sufficiency of the king, who could do no wrong, governments ordain, judge, condemn, and punish the most insignificant offenses, while maintaining themselves only by the greatest of all offenses, the annihilation of individual liberty. Thus, Ouida is right when she maintains that, quote, the state only aims at instilling those qualities in its public by which its demands are obeyed, and its exchequer is filled. Its highest attainment is the reduction of mankind to clockwork. In its atmosphere, All those finer and more delicate liberties, which require treatment and spacious expansion, inevitably dry up and perish. The state requires a tax-paying machine in which there is no hitch, an exchequer in which there is never a deficit, and a public, monotonous, obedient, colorless, spiritless, moving humbly like a flock of sheep along a straight high road between two walls. End quote. Yet, even a flock of sheep would resist the chicanery of the state, if it were not for the corruptive, tyrannical, and oppressive methods that it employs to serve its purposes. Therefore, Bakunin repudiates the state as synonymous with the surrender of the liberty of the individual or small minorities, the destruction of social relationship, the curtailment, or complete denial even, of life itself for its own aggrandizement. Blah. The state is the altar of political freedom. Freedom? Of political freedom, and, like the religious altar, it is maintained for the purpose of human sacrifice. In fact, there is hardly a modern thinker who does not agree that the government, organized authority, or the state is necessary only to maintain or protect property and monopoly. It has proven efficient in that function only. Even George Bernard Shaw, who hopes for miraculous from the state under Fabianism, nevertheless admits that, quote, "it is at present a huge machine for robbing and slave driving of the poor by brute force." End quote. This being the case, it's hard to see why the clever prefacer wishes to uphold the state after poverty shall have ceased to exist. Unfortunately, there are still a number of people who continue in the fatal belief that government rests on natural laws, that it maintains social order and harmony, that it diminishes crime, and that it prevents the lazy man from fleecing his fellows. I shall therefore examine these contentions. A natural law is that factor in which man asserts himself freely and spontaneously without any external force, in harmony with the requirements of nature. For example, the demand for nutrition, for sexual gratification, for light, air, and exercise is a natural law, but its expression needs not the machinery of government. It needs not the club, the handcuff, or the prison. To obey such laws, if we may call it obedience, requires only spontaneity and free opportunity. That governments do not maintain themselves through such harmonious factors is proven by the terrible array of violence, force, and coercion all governments use in order to live. Thus, Blackstone is right when he says, human laws are invalid because they are contrary to the laws of nature. Unless it be the Order of Warsaw after the slaughter of thousands of people, it is difficult to ascribe to governments any capacity for order or social harmony. Order derived through submission and maintained by terror is not much of a safe guarantee. Yet, that is the only order that governments have ever maintained. True social harmony grows naturally out of solidarity of interests. In a society where those who always work never have anything, while those who never work enjoy everything, solidarity of interests is non-existent. Hence, social harmony is but a myth. The only way organized authority meets this grave situation is by extending still greater privileges to those who have already monopolized the earth, and by still further enslaving the disinherited masses. Thus, the entire arsenal of government, laws, police, soldiers, the courts, legislatures, and prisons, is strenuously engaged in quote-unquote harmonizing the most antagonistic elements in society. The most absurd apology for authority and law is that they serve to diminish crime. Aside from the fact that the state is itself the greatest criminal, breaking every written and natural law, stealing in the form of taxes, killing in the form of war and capital punishment, it has come to an absolute standstill in coping with crime. It has failed utterly to destroy or even minimize the horrible scourge of its own creation. Crime is not but misdirected energy. So long as every institution of today, economic, political, social, and moral, conspires to misdirect human energy into the wrong channels, so long as most people are out of place doing the things they hate to do, living a life they loathe to live, crime will be inevitable, and all the laws on the statuses can only increase, but never do away with crime. What does society, as it exists today, know of the process of despair, the poverty, the horrors, the fearful struggle the human soul must pass on its way to crime and degradation? Who knows? Who that knows this terrible process can fail to see the truth in these words of Peter Kropotkin? Quote, those who hold the balance between the benefits thus attributed to law and punishment, and the degrading effect of the latter on humanity, those who will estimate the torrent of depravity poured abroad in human society by the informer, favored by the judge even, and paid for in clinking cash by governments, under the pretext of aiding to unmask crime, those who will go within prison walls and there see what human beings become when deprived of liberty, when subjected to the care of brutal keepers, to coarse, cruel words, to 1,000 stinging, piercing humiliations, will agree with us that the entire apparatus of prison and punishment is an abomination which ought to be brought to an end. The deterrent influence of law on the lazy man is too absurd to merit consideration. If society were only relieved of the waste and expense of keeping a lazy class, the equally great expense of the paraphernalia of protection this lazy class requires, and equally the great expense of paraphernalia and protection this lazy class requires, the social tables would contain an abundance for all, including even the occasional lazy individual. Besides, it is well to consider that laziness results either from special privileges or physical and mental abnormalities. Our present insane system of production fosters both, and the most astounding phenomenon is that people should want to work at all now. Anarchism aims to strip labor of its deadening, dulling aspect, of its gloom and compulsion. It aims to make work an instrument of joy, of strength, of color, of real harmony. So the poorest sort of man should find work in both recreation and hope. Quick side, that's honestly that's one thing that stands out in my mind is, that stood out in my mind from like when I read this previously, was that point of, where was it? The most astounding phenomenon is that people should want to work at all now. That is truly the case. I'd wager you ask any millennial that's out there. We have all been subjected to the think pieces for decades now about, oh, we're so lazy. We're so lazy. We're not willing to do anything. No, we're fucking tired. We are tired and we are exhausted because I'm willing to bet easily at least half of y'all out there have been working constantly and not really feeling like you're making much gain since you entered the workforce. I'm pushing a little over 20 years doing that myself, and it doesn't feel like it's really making much headway in terms of, actual work giving a benefit. It's like every time you make 2 steps forward, everything else in society pushes you backwards 5 steps. I don't know. It's an entire thing there. And it is deeply unpleasant, and I really appreciate reading that all over again. Especially in light of how like things are today. To achieve such an arrangement of life, government, with its unjust, arbitrary, repressive measures... To achieve such an arrangement of life, government, with its unjust, arbitrary, repressive measures, must be done away with. At best, it is not but imposed one single mode of life upon all, without regard to individual and social variations and needs. In destroying government and statutory laws, anarchism proposes to rescue the self-respect and independence of the individual from all restraint and invasion by authority. Only in freedom can man grow to his full stature. Only in freedom will he learn to think and move and give the very best in him. Only in freedom will he realize the true force of the social bonds which men knit together, and which are the true foundation of a normal social life. But what about human nature? Can it be changed? And if not, will it endure under anarchism? poor human nature, what horrible crimes have been committed in thy name. Every fool, from king to policeman, from the flat-headed parson to the visionless dabbler in science, presumes to speak authoritatively of human nature. The greater the mental charlatan, the more definite his insistence on wickedness and weakness of human nature. Yet, how can anyone speak of it today, with every soul in a prison, with every heart fettered, wounded, and maimed? Cross time, preach, madam. John Burroughs has stated that experimental study of animals in captivity is absolutely useless. Their character, their habits, their appetites undergo a complete transformation when torn from their soil in field and forest. With human nature caged in a narrow space, whipped daily into submission, how can we speak of its potentialities? Freedom, expansion, opportunity, and, above all, peace and repose alone can teach us the real dominant factors of human nature and all its wonderful possibilities. Anarchism, then, really stands for the liberation of the human mind from the dominion of religion, the liberation of the human body from the dominion of property, the liberation from the shackles and restraint of government. Anarchism stands for a social order based on the free grouping of individuals for the purpose of producing real social wealth, an order that will guarantee to every human being free access to the earth and full enjoyment of the necessities of life, according to individual desires, tastes, and inclinations. This is not a wild fancy or an aberration of the mind. It is a conclusion arrived at by hosts of intellectual men and women the world over, a conclusion resulting from the close and studious observation of the tendencies of modern society. Individual liberty and economic equality, the twin forces for the birth of what is fine and true in man. As to methods, anarchism is not, as some may suppose, a theory of the future to be realized through divine inspiration. It's a living force in the affairs of our life, constantly creating new conditions. The methods of anarchism, therefore, do not comprise an ironclad program to be carried out under all circumstances. Methods must grow out of the economic needs of each place and clime, and the intellectual and temperamental requirements of the individual. The serene, calm character of a Tolstoy will wish different methods for social reconstruction than the intense, overflowing personality of a Michael Bakunin or Peter Kropotkin. Equally so, it must be apparent that the economic and political needs of Russia will dictate more drastic measures than would England or America. Anarchism does not stand for military drill and uniformity. It does, however, stand for the spirit of revolt, in whatever form, against everything that hinders human growth. All anarchists agree in that, as they also agree in their opposition to the political machinery as a means of bringing about great social change. Looping back to a previous sentence. Equally so, it must be apparent that the economic and political needs of Russia will dictate more drastic measures than would England or America. Okay, that's what that was. I read that sentence wrong. All voting, says Thoreau, is a sort of gaming, like checkers or backgammon. A playing with right and wrong, its obligation never exceeds that of expediency. Even voting for the right thing is doing nothing for it. A wise man will not leave the right to mercy of chance, nor wish it to prevail through the power of the majority. A close examination of the machinery of politics and its achievements will bear out the logic of Thoreau. What does the history of parliamentarism show? Nothing but failure and defeat. Not even a single reform to ameliorate the economic and social stress of the people. Laws have been passed and enactments made for the improvement and protection of labor. Thus, it was proven only last year that Illinois, with the most rigid laws for mine protection, had the greatest mine disasters. In states where child labor laws prevail, child exploitation is at its highest. And though with us the workers enjoy full political opportunities, capitalism has reached the most brazen zenith. Oh, sister. Oh, no. No, it's able to go even further. Oh. Even were the workers able to have their own representatives, for which our good socialist politicians are clamoring, what chances are there for honesty and good faith? One has but to bear in mind the process of politics to realize that its path of good intentions is full of pitfalls. Wire pulling, intriguing, flattering, lying, cheating, in fact, chicanery of every description, whereby the political aspirant can achieve success. Added to that is a complete demoralization of character and conviction, until nothing is left that would make one hope for anything from such a human derelict. Time and again, the people were foolish enough to trust, believe, and support their last farthing with their last farthing aspiring politicians, only to find themselves betrayed and cheated. It may be claimed that men of integrity would not become corrupt in the political grinding mill. Perhaps not. But such men would be absolutely helpless to exert the slightest influence on behalf of labor, as indeed has been shown in numerous instances. The state is the economic master of its servants. Good men, if such there be, would either remain true to their political faith and lose their economic support, or they would cling to their economic master and be utterly unable to do the slightest good. The political arena leaves one no alternative. One must either be a dunce or a rogue. The political superstition is still holding sway over the hearts and minds of the masses, but the true lovers of liberty will have no more to do with it. Instead, they believe with Stirner that man has as much liberty as he is willing to take. Anarchism, therefore, stands for direct action, the open defiance of, and the resistance to, all laws and restrictions, economic, social, and moral. But defiance and resistance are illegal, and therein lies the salvation of man. Everything illegal necessitates integrity, self-reliance, and courage. In short, it calls for free, independent spirits, for men who are men, and who have a bone in their backs which you cannot pass your hand through. Universal suffrage owes its existence to direct action. If not for the spirit of rebellion, of the defiance on the part of American Revolutionary fathers, their posterity would still wear the king's coat. If not for the direct action of a John Brown and his comrades, America would still trade in the flesh of the black man. True, the trade in white flesh is still going on, but that too will have to be abolished by direct action. Trade unionism, the economic arena of the modern gladiator, owes its existence to direct action. It is but recently that law and government have attempted to crush the trade union movement, and condemned the exponents of man's right to organize to prison as conspirators. Condemn the exponents of man's right to organize to... Attempted to crush the trade union movement, and condemn the exponents of man's right to organize to prison as conspirators. Had they thought to assert their cause through begging, pleading, and compromise, trade unionism would today be a negligible quantity. In France, in Spain, in Italy, in Russia, nay, even in England, witness the growing rebellion of English labor unions. Direct, revolutionary, economic action has become so strong a force in the battle for individual liberty as to make the world realize the tremendous importance of labor's power. The general strike, the supreme expression of economic consciousness of the workers, was ridiculed in America but a short time ago. Today, every great strike, in order to win, must realize the importance of solidaric general protest. Direct action, having proven effective along economic lines, is equally potent in the environment of the individual. There, 100 forces encroach upon his being, and only persistent resistance to them will finally set them free. Direct action against the authority in the shop, direct action against the authority of the law, direct action against the invasive, meddlesome authority of our moral code, is the logical, consistent method of anarchism. Will it not lead to a revolution? Indeed it will. No real social change has ever come about without a revolution. People are either not familiar with their history, or they have not yet learned that revolution is but thought carried into action. Anarchism, the great leaven of thought, is today permeating every phase of human endeavor. Science, art, literature, the drama, the effort for economic betterment, in fact, every individual in social opposition to the existing disorder of things, is illuminated by the spiritual light of anarchism. It is a philosophy of the sovereignty of the individual. It is a theory of social harmony. It is a great, surging, living truth that is reconstructing the world that will usher in the dawn. And I'm going to go ahead and stop this one there. We are just shy of an hour, but I feel that was a good run through of, it's a good break because that's the end of chapter 1. I'm going to go ahead and continue working my way through here. I'm really glad reading through this, and it is certainly worth bearing in mind that the world that Emma Goldman existed in, for everything else going on, it was a very different world. Like, World War I didn't even really happen until like late in her life. The fallout of the German Reich and everything coming after that, none of this wound up happening, not as heavily. I think maybe some of the lead up of that. I am not a historian. There's a lot that has happened between when she lived and developments today, which in all honesty, I think she would have recognized. As she said early in chapter 1, there is no way to create a framework because there's always going to be new changes. What matters are the underlying principles that are present. And through at least the first chapter here, there are some commonalities that even back then, they still exist today. And arguably, I would think it's gotten even worse now. Like, it's become more exploitative, if not work in some regards becoming easier, just by means of, easier means of production, a lot more digital work and stuff like that. It is still very much the case that I want to say that I've seen studies where productivity vastly outstrips anything that has happened prior to like where we're at in history right now. And it's an unequal balance, and we're expected to keep maintaining that grind set to the point that, like, you're expected to sit down and have a side hustle. Like, I know there's some people that look at you like weirdly if you don't have a side hustle, and I'm like, no, I want to actually enjoy some of my life. There's a number of parallels that I believe can be drawn for things that she experienced and the modern day things that we experience now, and where there may be things that she is off about. Well, admittedly, I did just read it. I was just kind of going like flow of thought. I know there was one or two things. And I was like, that's not so much now. In the context of her time, they were accurate. And maybe those things are no longer, maybe those areas that may not sync up today are no longer an issue. They were addressed. Those are fine now. But we have different things now. So I feel this is a worthwhile thing to go ahead and sit and read. And I'm really happy to be able to go ahead and like bring some voice to this one. If you got any other philosophers or books that you may want to recommend me to read through, I definitely will. I'm absolutely open to doing that. I will have to go with some degree of care because copyright law is a but I do believe that this one is in public domain, so copyright law can suck a fat chode. But yeah, that's what I got for this right now. I'll continue with this one probably after Thanksgiving week. Like I said, I'm going to go ahead and record a couple of these back to back. So because I'm going out of town, as I'm recording this, it is the 20th. I'm going out of town next week to go visit with family for the holiday time and just let my head rest from everything for a bit. But I will still have things uploading, so I want to get those done. And it's not work because I'm enjoying doing this. So yeah. Yeah, if I keep going, I'm going to ramble. So I'm going to go ahead, bring this one to a pause. I'm going to re-up my water and then get on to the next one, which will be happening in a few minutes for me. But another week or week and a half for you. So I will see you in the future. Ooh, okay, I'm kind of ashamed of that one. Y'all take care. Cheers.